Hi, and welcome to the first of two videos about how to complete Project 6 in our class. If you recall, Project 6 is about extending the work we did with the SVG Creator.c program to make a variety of different SVG features and to learn about functions in C. The initial program that we did in Project 5, remember how that works. This C program runs using functions, most of which were pre-written. And when you call those functions, especially in a loop, you can produce a lot of SVG HTML output. When you paste that into a browser or into the W3 School site, then you can see the result of that SVG, the graphics that are produced. We can run that program first and kind of show how that works. What we're going to do in this project is enhance that to use functions in C to produce a lot more sophisticated output. You'll see that functions will let you reuse code, and we'll even be able to swap code between students and get a lot more output with minimal effort. So let's take a quick look at the plan. First, this is the first video. There's going to be a second video. In this video, we're going to find a suitable SVG feature. In other words, a shape. But some of the things you may find are not really shapes. Like you can do text, you can do images. So I'm calling them features. That's a better name. Find a suitable SVG feature on the web. Test that feature on the W3 School site and just play with it and see how it works. Not in C, but just strictly in HTML. And then format that SVG into a string suitable for using in the C program. That's basically where we're going to stop for step one. I'm going to also ask you to look at that SVG and indicate in your posting, post the SVG, post the output, and also post your ideas for what elements of that SVG feature might make good sense as parameters. Things you might want to change or another user might want to change each time they run the function. So that's the plan here. I'll be using an old version of Visual Studio Code to do this. You can use whatever IDE you want. You'll see that my version's kind of broken down and I have to use some workarounds. If you have another IDE, that should work fine. And we'll be making heavy use of the W3 School site because it's a very convenient way to play the SVG that's created, see what it looks like without having to create a file, open the file in a browser, reload the file, all that kind of stuff. So with no further ado, let's find a suitable SVG feature on the web. Now, there are tons and tons and tons of sites with free to use SVG features on the web. I'll show you an example here. Here's one I looked at and I just kind of picked this randomly. What you'll see here is a site that's got all kinds of badges or other elements, icons that are made using SVG commands. So I randomly picked this one, which is angle down. It's kind of a down pointing arrow. Not a very spectacular shape, but it's got a lot of important elements that we can see. And it's free to use because the license is Creative Commons. So as long as you credit the site where you got this from, and you can do that in a comment, then it's perfectly fine to use this SVG without copyright infringement. So I'm going to download this SVG file. And I'm going to actually open it in Visual Studio Code, not because I'm going to do any coding with it, but because I want to take a look at it. And that's an easy way using Editor to look at it, because the editor will also, since it understands SVG syntax, it will code, color highlight the SVG for you. Here's what it looks like. Now, it doesn't look very spectacular because it comes in as one long line. So it starts here and it goes over and way over here. Finally is the end. You'll see when we put this in our C program, we'll break it up into multiple strings just because it's so inconvenient to edit a program in C. If you have any language, if you have lines that extend off the right-hand side of the screen, it's really easy to forget something out here at the tail end and get error messages that make no sense whatsoever because you can't see the error. So I'm going to go ahead and just, but for now, let's go ahead and we can break, and SVG syntax is very forgiving. So we could break this up like this. I'll just put that on its own line. I'll put this on its own line. I'll just break this in a convenient place, like maybe there. It's a long line, so I'm gonna have to break it a few times. And I'll go ahead and put the closing SVG tag on its own line. Not that that's required. Now, this does exactly the same thing as the one big long line does, but it's easier to read. So let's go ahead and paste this into the W3 school site, and then we'll start talking about how it works, because you have to understand a little bit about how it works in order to see, when I put this in a function, what parameters does my function need to have? And one idea is wherever you see a number, maybe that would be, maybe that make a good function, a good parameter to my function. So I'm just going to highlight this, copy it. I'm going to put it over here in the W3 Schools Try It editor, which has already got a little bit of HTML set up that you need. And I'm going to put it in the body, just paste it in, and run it. Okay, it scrolled off, but there it is. It's a rather large black down pointing V. Let's see how that works. So let's look at the SVG a little bit. You can ignore the HTML and look at the width is 512 pixels. That's why it's so big. The height is 512 pixels. Viewbox we're going to ignore for now. You're welcome to Google this and play with it. I'm not going to get into it. The namespace you can ignore. This path is interesting. What is all this stuff in the path? Well, fortunately, we won't need to tinker with that. But so you know what it does, the way this shape is drawn, these are what are called vector graphics. So this shape is drawn not pixel by pixel, but basically stroke by stroke. And path says, just as you would draw this with a large marker, path says move here, down to here, over to here. So it actually, I think, outlines the shape and then fills it. So these are the commands. It's like a little program in SVG to actually draw the shape. We're going to leave that alone, and we're just going to add parameters to change a few things about the shape, like maybe the color and the location. So this is what we're starting from. So we know this works because we've tested it. So let's go ahead and see what would be necessary to put this into the C program. Because in C, all these SVG commands are going to have to be strings. They're going to have to be surrounded by quotes. And as you'll see, there's an interesting problem because there's all these quotes inside the quotes, which we will need to fix because C doesn't really understand the concept of a raw string. You have to have matched up quotes everywhere. So I'm going to take what I just copied here, from here to here. It's probably still my clipboard. Go into VS Code here. Oh, there it is. I didn't even have to paste it. And we're going to start converting that into a series of quoted strings in C. Now, this is a bit tedious to do, but it's not really complicated. Your editor is going to help you out a lot here, no matter which editor you're using, because we're going to use find and replace to change the double quotes in here, like here and here, into single quotes. Then we're going to put double quotes around the whole line, and C will be fine with that. It'll be fine with the multiple lines. It'll just stick the multiple, when the compiler sees it, it'll just stick the multiple lines together, it'll concatenate them. So that's going to work out. To do that, I'm going to go here and go edit, replace. I'm going to replace every double quote with a single quote. It might be slightly different in your editor, but doubtless your editor has this ability. And if I close this, which is inconveniently located under my Zoom window, hold on. Zoom always seems to put my little postage stamp cameo on top of what I want. Look at what's happened. What used to be double quote 512 pixels is now single quote. And unlike C, SVG will be fine with that. In C, you probably remember from your Zybook that single quotes, like apostrophes, go around one character only. They're only for single chars. Double quotes go around strings of characters. So SVG is more forgiving. So inside our C strings, we can put single quotes, which C will ignore, and put double quotes around the whole thing. So this is the part that involves a little typing, but it's not bad. Doubtless you can type this better than me. I'm putting a space at the end here too, because you need a space, because C is going to put all these lines together into one big long line again, and we don't want the numbers to run together. So a double quote here, a double quote here, if I got my insertion point moved correctly. Double quote here, double quote here. This really is the worst typing that you have to do. Writing the function itself is pretty straightforward, because really all the information you need is in this string. And then we need closing quotes like here. And notice the editor puts a closing quote for me, which is sometimes convenient, but is also sometimes, like now, annoying. And here. Now let's see if that worked out right. We can tell from the syntax highlighting that Visual Studio has done, and your editor will do as well, whether or not we got this right. Because if we forgot a double quote somewhere, we're going to get, it won't be green in here. Notice everything in single quotes turned to green. That's all right. And the rest of it looks up. There's an extra quote. Okay. I think I have the whole string up. There's another one. These are thanks to the editor feature, unfortunately. I think I have those all correct. So before I go any farther, let's go back. Let's just leave this open in the editor. Let's go back to the original svgcreator.c program. Make sure that still works. Always good to test your code, because maybe you picked up an old version that you had lying around and it doesn't work. You put a bunch of new stuff in it, it still doesn't work. It just makes it that much harder to debug. So let's make sure the really super simple version of svgcreator.c from the past still works. So here it is. I'm going to compile it, and you'll see that again, Zoom is doing me, putting all my tools in the wrong place. Because I have a broken old version of Visual Studio Code on an old version of Mac OS, I'm going to compile this program and run it a really old school way. And so I don't have, if I click this triangle up here, nothing good will happen. That's because that extension no longer works in this version of Mac OS X. However, I can do it on the command line in a terminal, which is what you have at the bottom of the screen down here. And it's really pretty simple typing. I'm just going to directly run the compiler and tell it to compile the file and see what happens. So I'm going to type GCC. Make sure I'm in the right directory. Yep, that's where I stored my code. If you're not sure, you can go here and do, you can go, you can go here. Too many windows. One more time. You can go here and right click, at least in Visual Studio Code, and do copy path, and it will show you the full path to where your file is. You can copy. So I'm in the right place. GCC, that's the GNU-C compiler. If you're running on Windows, you might have something called MingGW. That's just GCC by another name. If you're using Visual Studio 2019, the full-fledged product, it may be using a different compiler called CL or Clang, but GCC works fine. GCC, the name of the file I want to compile, which is the SVG start. That's what I renamed the old program. And I'm going to tell you, I want the output file to be called old. So that's going to compile this current file, svgcreator.c. That's what the name here is. And it's going to produce an output file, a runnable, an exe file called svgcreator.old. Let's see if that works or if I made some syntax errors. If you don't get any error messages, it worked. That's by default. GCC has very few warnings, so it compiled. Hopefully, it'll work. And to run it, all I have to do is give its name, preceded by /. This is a Unix OS, Mac OS convention. It means current folder. SVG creator. Now, if you're tired of watching me painfully type this stuff, I'm only going to have to type this once because in the terminal, I can keep replaying my old command, and that will avoid me having to make so many typos. Okay, I'm going to copy and paste this as you did in Project 5 all over the place. I'm going to go over to the try it window. Let me get this stuff out of the way. The try it window. And I'll just wipe out all this stuff and paste in what I just created. Let's see if it, and yes, you see this looks like the old circle demo. This should draw a single circle, right? There it is, a beautiful yellow circle on a purple background. Okay, the old program still works. Now we're going to paste the new stuff into the old program. So it's always better to start with a program you have that's working and extend it than to try to start from scratch. So back in the old program here, I'm going to put in the string. And I'll go ahead and make like a very simple function definition around this. It doesn't really do much yet, but it'll let us check that the program actually works. Doesn't return anything. It's void. It's called down angle or something like that. I think that was the name of the shape. No parameters. And in the middle, in the body of the function, I'm going to paste the code we just generated, the string we just generated, which is the string here, the one we went to all that trouble to put the quotes around. It's got to have the quotes because now you're in C, and in C, strings must be contained, multi-character strings must be contained within double quotes. So that's why we went to all that trouble to put quotes around perfectly good SVG. I need to assign it to a variable, so let's make a char star. We'll come back to why it's a char star and not just a char at some point in the future in this class. Let's call it our shape gets all that stuff. And if you want to be tidy, you can even go along and indent this. Won't make any difference in the way it runs. Oops. So all this stuff here goes in a variable called our shape. Let's just make sure that still compiles. If you left down any quotes, single or double, it probably won't compile, and this is a good time to catch that. So over here, let me save it. And then I'll compile it. So I'll just replay my compile command. Oh, I must have done something wrong. Probably you did this, and I was so busy concentrating on all those quotes, forgot, you know what, you need a semicolon at the end in C. So I think if we do this, it's going to compile correctly. Again, really easy to do. Just run this. Okay. At this point, we're basically done with the first step. So let me show you what you need to post. To post, you need to go to the, look at what you had in the W3 Schools site. Oops, sorry, wrong window. again. Here we go. This site, and post this SVG. Not this SVG, sorry. Post this SVG that we had. Well, let's just get it again. We'll run the program again. We'll get the SVG again. So be a little easier. So I compiled it, and all that you need to do is run it. Grab this stuff. The output's going to look the same because our function doesn't do anything yet, right? That's in the next step. Right now, the function just has a string in it. Fine. We're not running it, so nothing happens. But we are compiling it, so we know it's syntactically valid. So take this, just to double check. Run it again. Yep. The circle's in a different place because it's random, as you probably recall. Okay. So at this point, take your SVG that you created, that you selected, which was this SVG here. And post that. That's the one that you put the quotes around. Okay. When you do that, look at a couple of things because you need to add some explanation here. When you look at this, what quantities in here might make sense to be changeable? So if you ran the function more than once, what would you change to get a different output? Well, you probably don't want to mess with any of this stuff here. I know I don't, because I know it traces out a path. I can't visualize exactly how that works. No problem. But I do see the 512, 512. I bet that width and height could be parameters. I also know, even though it's not in here, but if I looked at the circled example, which you can see right down here, that there's also a color that you can give. You can do fill equals color. So I could add fill to this. So if I needed to have 3 parameters, which you need to have at least 3 parameters in this, you could do width, height, and fill color. We'll talk about exactly how to do that in the next video. But for now, post this SVG with the quotes around it, and post your statement about, I'm going to have a width parameter, a height parameter, and a color parameter. That's basically what you're delivering for step 1. Then you're ready to start thinking about, in step 2, how to actually make this function in C do something. Okay, thanks.